Number 10. Click, click, slide. One night in a small town not too far from where you are now, a woman, Sally, was late to pick up her daughter from a school basketball game. The reason she was late was because she'd stopped to get a manicure and long new acrylic nails put on at the salon. While she was rushing to the school, her car stalled out on the train tracks, and suddenly she saw a bright light and heard the train's horn as it collided with her car. The car was destroyed, and the only piece of her body that was found were her legs. The whole town was abuzz the next day with the mystery of what had happened, but at 6:30, the same time the train killed Sally, all of the young people in the town heard three strange noises. Click, click, slide, over and over again. It seemed to move all the way from one side of town to the other, from the train tracks to the school. Originally, people were wary of what was going on, so they walked together in groups, but every night they heard it. Click, click, slide. And after a while, the townspeople were terrified, and no one went outside alone after dark, especially if you weren't a grown-up. One night, young Emma was sitting in her living room with her mother when her mom asked her, "Emma, I haven't been feeling well. Would you go to the store and pick up some medicine for me?" Emma looked worried and said, "But Mom, it's almost 6:30. And her mother shrugged it off, saying it's just an old story and that she needed to grow up. So off Emma went to the store, but on her way back, as night fell, sure enough she heard the noise. Click, click, slide. Click, click, slide. And she looked behind her but saw nothing. She quickened her pace as she walked home, and behind her, getting louder, click, click, slide. And as she got closer to home, the sounds were practically in her ear. Click, click, slide. And as she reached her front door, she turned around to see the mangled torso of a woman dragging herself with her long nails along the ground towards her. Click, click, slide. Emma pounded on the door and begged to be let inside, but her mother had locked the door and fallen asleep. And behind her, louder than ever, she heard click, click, slide. The next morning, the mother couldn't find Emma, and when she opened the front door to look for her, all that she saw was a trail of blood going down the stairs, and a message scrawled in blood on the front steps that read, "Why didn't you open the door, Mother?" I can already imagine the special effects makeup on Sally. Number 9. The Keyhole. Our next tale is a bit more simple and would be some slow build horror for sure, but some of my favorite scary movies are like that. A man comes into town on business. All of the hotels in the area are booked up for the holidays, so he decides to check into a less than savory hotel, as it's the only one with a vacancy sign on. When the front desk worker gives him his key, she says that on his floor there is a locked room with no number on it, and that he must stay out of it at all costs. Agreeing, he heads to his room, and as he does, he walks by the room with no number. He almost knocks, but decides against it and goes to bed. The next night, as he's returning to his room, he walks by the door and sees that the keyhole is rather wide, as though the lock was from a very long time ago. And he crouches down and looks inside. He sees a room much like his own, but in the back corner, there's a woman with skin as white as snow, crying with her head against the wall. He almost knocks, but decides against it. The next night, the man decides to look through the keyhole one more time to check on the woman, but all he sees when he looks through is the color red. She must have blocked the door with a red scarf or tape or something, he thinks to himself. When he checks out, he confesses to the front desk worker that he'd looked through the keyhole into the room. She sighs and tells him that they don't rent the room anymore because a man murdered his wife in there many years ago, and when the police found her body, she'd been strangled and beaten so hard that her eyes had filled with blood, and they turned completely red. Number 8. The King of Hearts. Modern playing cards are filled with meanings and symbols based in truth, like the 4 suits being representative of the 4 seasons, or the 52 cards representing the number of weeks in the year, and the kings are all based on real rulers, and the King of Hearts represents the emotionally disturbed Charles VII of France. King Charles fell ill near the end of his life, and it was at this time that he became obsessed with numerology and playing cards, as he knew his face was already immortalized in their ink. He began to obsess over the fact that the king was the 13th card of any suit, and that it would bring him terrible misfortune. He started to see the number everywhere, and it eventually drove him mad. One day, one of his butlers went to the king's room to feed him, and found King Charles wielding a sword, proclaiming that the cards have shown me the truth of 13, and it's not meant for mortal eyes. And he then thrust the sword into the left side of his head, and it came out on the other side. His playing card was changed to depict the grisly way he died, and check for yourself, on many decks of cards, the King of Hearts has a sword in the left side of his head. It's even creepier that he chose to end his life on 7/6/1462, with 7 and 6 making 13, and the numbers of the year also adding up to 13. Makes you wonder if the number really did have some strange power. Number 7. The Cremation of Sam McGee. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The Northern Lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge of Lake LaBarge where I cremated Sam McGee. This is the beginning of one of my most favorite poems poems of all time. Written by Robert W. Service, this creepy poem tells the story of two men who are on an Arctic expedition, and unfortunately, Sam passes away from the cold. The poem follows Sam's friend's journey, bringing his frozen, dead body through the ice and snow to fulfill Sam's last wish, to be cremated, so that he could feel like he's warm and back at home in the South one last time. I won't spoil the rest, but I believe that there's enough of a story to make a movie here. To be following one man's struggle through the Arctic to see his friend's dying wish come true would be a pretty compelling film, not to mention the unexpected twists. Johnny Cash actually does a fantastic reading of it if you're so inclined to listen. Number 6, A Ride Home. Now there are many different versions of this story, and some of them have been documented in real life by real people. One version is called The Witch of White Rock Lake. Another is called The Lady in White, but as the story goes, one night a woman was driving home after a long night shift, and due to some rain, the main road was out, so she needed to take a detour down an old dirt road that goes by the lake. As she's driving, she suddenly sees a woman in a white dress standing in the middle of the road. She stops the car, and as the woman in white approaches, she sees that they are absolutely drenched, head to toe. The woman comes to the window and, weeping, she asks for a ride home, saying that her boat capsized on the lake and that she needs to get home to her family. The driver says, "Of course, get in and tell me where you need to go." The lady in white gets in the back seat and gives her an address. It's not too far from where they are now, and they drive off into the night. After a little while, the driver asks for some clarification on the directions, but when she turns around, the woman is nowhere to be seen, but the seat is soaking wet. She decides to finish the journey to the address and arrives at a house. She knocks on the door and a man answers. She tells him about the woman in white and how she gave her this address and then disappeared. The man said, "You're the 5th person to knock on my door and tell me this story. 5 years ago tonight, my wife and I were sailing on the lake and we had a terrible accident and she drowned. She's been pleading for help ever since." Number 5, The Seventh Barn. Now, I think that this next one could be great on the silver screen, but not necessarily because of how scary it is, but because you could lean into the investigation angle and how obsession can drive people to do all sorts of crazy things. There was once a wealthy farmer who loved his wife so much that he bought her a heck of a lot of land as a wedding present. When they had a child, the husband decided to celebrate the occasion by building a barn and putting a plaque on it with their name. Every time the man and his wife had a child, he did this, and eventually they had 6 barns and 6 children, and they were happy. When his wife announced that she was pregnant again, he was overjoyed and began construction on the 7th barn, and the day that he finished, she went into labor. Unfortunately, his wife died in childbirth, and so did their unborn son. Driven mad by grief and heartbreak, the man took the rest of his family out to the 7th barn to bury his wife and son, he told them. But then, he took an axe and killed all of them, and hung himself from the rafters. They say if you visit the barn at night, you can see his ghostly figure hanging by his neck, blowing in the wind. And over the years, the land and barns were sold off, all but the 7th, as everyone knew of the tragedy that happened there. But a teacher told his son the scary story, and they decided to try to find the 7th barn. They scoured old maps, toured through the countryside and plains, and finally found what they thought was the 7th barn. It even had the nameplate on the outside, and they headed out there with a video camera to get some paranormal evidence. The next morning, the teacher's wife reported the son and husband missing, and the cops found their car abandoned on the side of the road near a barn. And when they looked inside, they saw their bodies hung by the neck from the rafters, blowing in the wind. Number 4, Knock. Now, making this next one into a feature-length film would be interesting, not necessarily because of the content, but for the lack thereof. This was published in 1948, written by an author named Frederick Brown, and it's not your normal ghost story, but the shortest horror story ever written. To make this a movie, I think you'd have to start long before the events take place and build the world up. It's only 2 sentences, and it goes like this. The last man on earth sat alone at the room. There was a knock on the door. Simple, short, and spooky. Number 3, Lick. One night, a young woman was home alone. Her roommates were out of town for the night, and she had the run of the place. She watched TV and ate junk food all evening, but when the night came, there was a terrible thunderstorm, and despite the fact that she should have grown out of it, she was still afraid of the dark, and the shadows, lightning, and noises in an empty house scared her half to death. Luckily, she had her faithful dog Spot to take care of her, and he curled up next to her on the bed and licked her hand to comfort her, and she fell asleep. In the middle of the night, she woke up to a noise, something that was dripping. Maybe some rain was leaking in, or a tap wasn't fully off, but she heard it loud and clear. Drip, drip, drip. The lightning and shadows and sounds scared her, but Spot licked her hand for comfort and she fell back asleep. An hour later, she woke up and heard the noise again. Drip, drip, drip. She wondered if she should go check on it, but she was too frightened from the shadows and the lightning. Spot licked her hand for comfort, and again she fell asleep. She woke 1 more hour later to the same noise. Drip, 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 and this time she gathered her courage and went to investigate. She followed the sound around her house until she realized it was coming from the bathroom, which she must have left the tap on. She opened the door and saw something horrible. Spot was hanging upside down from the shower rod, and he had been skinned. There was still some blood falling from his body, hitting the floor with a drip, drip, drip. Terrified, she ran back to her room to call the police, but inside, she saw a note scrawled on the wall in blood, and it said, "Humans can lick too." As someone who grew up with a dog that slept on their bed, this one terrified me, and I'd like to see it on the big screen. Number 2, Red Ribbon. Now this one was probably one of my favorite horror stories growing up, as it was featured in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Although it was a green ribbon, I prefer it with red. I'm not sure if it's the scariest, but there's a lot of stuff that you could take from here to make a pretty compelling movie. Bill loved Sally with all of his heart, common name for horror stories I guess, but there was always something off about her. Even as he fiddled with the engagement ring in his pocket, he thought so. And every day, no matter what, she had a red ribbon tied around her neck. He proposed and she accepted, and later he asked about the ribbon, and she replied with, "Bill, I must never take off my red ribbon, and if you love me, you'll never ask me about it again." And he left it alone. Over the years, he bought her many beautiful outfits, but no matter what she was wearing, even on their wedding day, she wore the red ribbon tied neatly in a bow around her neck. And the question began to eat away at him. On their anniversary, he bought her a beautiful necklace, thinking that she would have to remove the ribbon to wear it, but when he went to remove it so he could put the necklace around her neck, she said, "The necklace is beautiful and she'll treasure it forever, but I must never take off my red ribbon." This angered him slightly, but he let it go. When their baby was born, it was the happiest moment of his life, but the question came back to him when the baby reached his hand towards the thing tied around its mother's neck, and Sally said sweetly to her new baby, "No, Mommy must never take off her red ribbon." Many nights later, the question he was never to ask had burrowed deep into his mind, and it was driving him mad. So while Sally was sleeping, he slowly reached over and pulled at both sides of the bow on the pretty red ribbon. And just as it finally came loose, Sally's eyes opened and her head rolled off of her neck and onto the floor. With a single tear rolling down her cheek, she cried, "I warned you." And finally, number 1, Don't Turn on the Light. I think this one is so scary because for some reason it feels the most realistic, and I can already see the trailer in my head. Miranda and Lucy were roommates and went to school at the local college. One night Lucy comes home and tells Miranda that they've been invited to a big party and that they need to get ready to go. Miranda says she's not feeling well and that she's gonna have a nap on the couch instead. Lucy heads to the party, but halfway through her walk she realizes she's forgotten her keys. Classic Lucy. When she gets back to her apartment, she opens the very creaky door slowly so that she doesn't make too much noise. She can hear steady, slow breaths, so she decides to not turn on the light so she doesn't wake up her sleeping friend. She knows the place like the back of her hand, so it's no problem. She walks through the apartment in the dark, quietly, grabs her keys, and heads back out the door to the party. She dances all night and later, exhausted, she walks back up the stairs to her apartment and sees the door wide open. She runs inside but can't see anything in the dark, so she flicks the switch on the wall, and when the room brightens, she sees Miranda, mangled and covered in blood in the middle of the floor. Lucy lets out a blood-curdling scream, and then she sees the mirror on the wall, and on it was a message scrawled in Miranda's blood, "Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the lights?"
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Scream. The movie is called Scream, but technically it is the 5th installment of the classic horror series. This highly anticipated movie is set to see franchise originals Courtney Cox, David Arquette, and Neve Campbell returning to the screen as Gail Weather, Dewey Riley, and Sidney Prescott, but it is said that the movie will also see a bunch of new characters as well. Basically, the premise is said to be set 25 years after a series of terrible killings shocked the town of Woodsboro, California. A new killer now dons the classic ghost face mask, and his target happens to be a group of teenagers who reveal the secrets of the town's deadly past. The movie is coming up quickly as it is said to be released on the 14th of January 2022. In our number 9 spot today we have Halloween Ends. Halloween Kills was on the list I did last year for scary horror movies coming out in 2021, and here we have the final chapter in the reboot trilogy. Set to be released next October, little is known about the plot of the current movie. While Halloween Kills definitely received some mixed reviews, this next installment is still highly anticipated. I won't spoil the end of the last one for you in case you haven't seen it, but if you have, you know what I mean when I say it'll be interesting to see where they take the story considering the end of the last one. I definitely have some guesses myself, but I'll see you back here in 10 months when we can discuss. Right now the movie is set to be released in theaters on October 14th, 2022. In our number 8 spot today we have Nope. This is the next movie from thriller mastermind Jordan Peele. Written and directed by him under Monkey Paw Productions, little is known exactly what this movie will be about. Considering the rightfully due success of his past hits Get Out and Us, there are extremely high hopes for this one. Jordan has an amazing ability to really transport us into the world that the characters live in, and he really creates a tone that can be felt from the beginning to the end. This, coupled with the incredible actors that land roles in his movie, they truly are works of art and really have set the bar for this generation of horror films. Right now, only a poster has been released and a cast list that includes Daniel Kaluuya, Keke Palmer, and Steven Yeun. This one is set to be released on July 22nd of 2022, which is my birthday, so thank you Mr. Peele for this gift, I cannot wait. In our number 7 spot today we have Violent Night. Purposefully meant to be a play on the classic Christmas Carol, this movie won't be seen this holiday season, but it will be making its debut in the 2022 one. The studios are looking ahead as they announced that David Harbour would be starring in this new thriller from Norwegian filmmaker Tommy Wirkola. This movie is said to be, quote, a cold dark holiday thriller that says you should always bet on red. This movie is definitely sure to not be either a silent or a holy night and will definitely add a little fright to your next holiday season. I know, we gotta get through this one first, but we can do it. In our number 6 spot today we have The Black Phone. This is a movie that is based on the short story of the same name, which has longtime fans super excited for its quickly upcoming debut. Starring Ethan Hawke, this movie is set to focus on a shy but extremely clever 13-year-old boy who is being held in a soundproof basement by a masked man. He then starts to receive calls on a disconnected phone on the wall where he can hear the voices of the masked man's past victims. I don't know about you guys, but I haven't actually read the short story, and even if I had, who knows what the movie is adding or changing, so I am super stoked to see this one. The best news is that the release date for this one is coming up quick, as it is set for February 4th of 2022. In just a few short months we can all report back on how nerve-wracking this movie is, because I can already picture the stress. In our number 5 spot today we have Firestarter. Blumhouse is back to reboot the 1984 classic of the same name that is based off of the Stephen King novel. Andy McGee in the movie will be played by Zac Efron, and he must do whatever it takes to protect his daughter. She has developed pyrokinesis, which is like the psychic ability to create and control fire using just your mind. Because of this, the pair is being targeted by some sort of top secret government agency. This sounds like sort of an action thriller to me, but to be perfectly honest with you, I'm not entirely sure what to expect. Maybe it's more like suspenseful and quiet. I could honestly see it going either way. Whatever the case is, I am sure Zac Efron plays a fantastic Andy, and I'm super excited to see it. At the moment, there isn't a set release date, but it is just said to be sometime in 2022. Hopefully the wait won't be too long. In our number 4 spot today we have The Northman. The director behind movies like The Witch and The Lighthouse, Robert Eggers, is back with a new movie that is said to be a historical thriller. Okay, I'm intrigued. The movie is said to have been co-written by Robert along with the Icelandic poet and novelist Sjan, which is very cool. I'm sorry if I said their name wrong, I'm not super familiar. The movie apparently focuses on just how far a Viking prince will go in order to avenge his father's death, and I swear every movie plot I've told you today gets me more and more excited for the 2022 horror scene. I just feel like so many creators are branching out and I love it. The cast includes Alexander Skarsgård, Anya Taylor-Joy, Nicole Kidman, and Willem Dafoe, just to name a few. Right now the release date is set for April 22nd, 2022. In our number 3 spot today we have Orphan: First Kill. Okay, remember The Orphan from 2009 where that person called Lena was pretending to be a little girl named Esther and she's adopted into that family and then things get scary? Yeah, well this is a new movie that is said to be the prequel to that surprise smash hit. Apparently this movie will follow Lena/Esther as she escapes from an Estonia psychiatric facility and then goes on to impersonate the missing daughter of a wealthy family. Yeah, that's messed up. I suppose this movie is meant to show us how she ended up where we saw her in the original and give us more insights into how she became this way. Considering how well the first movie was received, I bet this one will also be a smashing success. I definitely was surprised to hear that they were making another Orphan movie after all of these years, but I am very excited to see it. The movie release is quickly approaching as it is said to be released on January 28th, 2022. In our number 2 spot today we have Don't Worry Darling. This upcoming upcoming psychological thriller is directed by Olivia Wilde and has a pretty stacked cast. Olivia is in the movie herself alongside Oscar-nominated Florence Pugh as well as Harry Styles. It is said that the movie will be following a 1950s housewife who becomes concerned that the company her husband runs is hiding some sinister secrets behind its glamorous exterior. Outside of this small plot point, I'm really not sure what the movie will entail, but it seems like it'll definitely be quite different from some of the others on this list. There have been a couple photos snuck from the set and the costuming and set design look absolutely stunning, so it's sure to be quite an aesthetic piece of work as well. We do seem to have a few more months to wait, however, as the release date is currently set for September 23rd, 2022. In our number 1 spot today we have Dark Harvest. This is actually a movie I included on last year's list because it was originally supposed to be released on September 24th of this year, but of course that did not happen because things were delayed due to the whole pandemic situation, which is very reasonable and understandable. The movie is now set to be released on September 23rd of 2022, and hopefully it won't see any more delays. Based on the novel of the same name, the movie is set to take place on Halloween in 1963. It focuses on the October Boy, who's also known as Hacksaw Face or Sawtooth Jack, the monster who rises from the cornfields every Halloween. He sets out and roams the streets armed with a knife, which is already a terrifying enough plot. In the town, there is a ritual for the teenagers and a group of boys set out to try and defeat Sawtooth Jack, but the question remains, is it really worth it? I guess we'll find out next fall.
Coming in at number 10 is the cult classic and one of my personal faves, Scream 6. After a nearly 10-year hiatus last year, fans lost their minds when it was announced that we would receive a long-awaited addition to the franchise, and we were blessed with Scream 5. It saw huge success, so it was no surprise at all when a direct sequel, Scream 6, was announced to be released only a year later on March 31st, 2023. This newest edition brings back some of our favorites, like the original cast member Courtney Cox as Gale Weathers, making her the only cast member to be in all 6 movies to date, though sadly, those bangs have not been in all 6 with her. Joining her is Hayden Panettiere as Kirby Reed from Scream 4, as well as the Scream 5 stars Melissa Barrera as Samantha Carpenter, the daughter of Billy Loomis, and Jenny Ortega as her half-sister Tara Carpenter. The newest addition to the cult thriller is gonna see a huge change, as the 4 survivors of the Ghostface killings leave Woodsboro behind and start a fresh chapter in New York City. Coming in at number 9 from director Tillman Singer is Cuckoo. Nothing much is known about the tight-lipped production, but seeing that it's brought to us by the same studio as Parasite, I'm sure we're in for a good ride. The film follows Gretchen, played by Euphoria star Hunter Schafer, who just moved with her family to an alpine resort after her mother's death. But soon after, she must uncover a conspiracy to save herself and her sister from a mysterious woman. The production team remains quite strict on keeping their plot under wraps, but the mystery revolving around this production only adds to the excitement. Though no hard release date has yet been set, it is slated to release in 2023, and I sure hope it's sooner rather than later. Coming in at number 8, we have yet another sequel to a classic. That's right, it's Gremlins 3. Set to release December 15th of 2023, this cult classic thriller is long awaited, and as usual, there are some rules to follow. Don't feed them after midnight, and don't get them wet. But between you and me, I have a feeling that some rules will be broken. I mean, there wouldn't be a movie if they didn't. Luckily, we're in good hands with original writer Chris Columbus and executive producer Steven Spielberg, so you know it's gonna be just as good as the first. That being said, however, the cast is still unconfirmed, and we have no idea who, if any, of the original cast will be returning. Fans are holding out for Zach Galligan, as he starred in the previous 2, but at this point it's all up in the air. And as for Gizmo, the adorable creature turned gremlin, well, according to Columbus, Gizmo may not survive Gremlins 3. He told Slash Film, quote, "I think Gizmo's death is probably a good idea, to be honest. He said too many people are dying. I wonder, isn't that kind of the whole point? Well, I guess we'll see what they have in store for us and those tiny creatures." Coming in at number 7, we have Last Voyage of the Demeter. Based on one single chapter from Bram Stoker's classic 1897 novel Dracula, the story takes place aboard a Russian sailing boat named Demeter. Chartered to carry 24 unmarked wooden crates from Carpathia to London, the story follows a doomed crew who try to survive aboard the ship while being stalked each night by an eerie and terrifying presence. But who could it be that's haunting them? Could it be Dracula? And to make matters worse, when the ship finally arrives at Whitby Harbor, it's a ghost town, found completely neglected and without a single crew member in sight. Originally set to release in January 27th of 2023, it looks like it's been pushed back to a later release date in the summer, so we'll have to wait a little longer to see who lurks in the shadows on the boat. Next up, coming in at number 6 is The Boogeyman, an adaptation of the iconic short story by horror king himself, Stephen King. This movie has got us all on edge for its release. I mean, how can you not be excited about a Stephen King adaptation? The plot follows a grieving family that is still reeling from the tragic death of their mother. But just when they think things can't get any worse, a teenage girl and her little sister find themselves plagued by a sadistic presence in their house and struggle to get their grieving father to pay attention before it's too late. Set to star Chris Messina, Marin Ireland, David Dastmalchian, Sophie Thatcher, and Vivian Lyra Blair, though it's not yet been released what character the cast will be playing respectively. Coming in at number 5, we have yet another franchise addition, The Nun 2. Directed by Michael Chavez, The Nun 2 will be the 9th installment in the Conjuring franchise. This project has been a long time coming, but was ultimately put on hold due to the pandemic back in 2020. Back in 2017, producer James Wan spoke about the possibility of a sequel to The Nun, stating, quote, "I do know where potentially, if The Nun works out, where The Nun 2 could lead to, and how that ties back to Lorraine's story that we've set up in the first 2 Conjurings, and to make it all come full circle." The Nun 2 is set in France, 1956, and the sequel will follow Sister Irene, played by American Horror Story's Tasia Farmiga, as she once again comes face to face with the demon nun Valak, reprised by the incredible Bonnie Aarons. Fans of the franchise will remember Valak was seemingly defeated at the end of The Nun, though we know this can't be true as she returns in The Conjuring 2 to haunt Lorraine. But the big question is, what kind of crooked and terrifying screams will Valak get into this time? I guess we'll just have to wait until September 8th, 2023 to see who survives. Coming in at number 4 is a really exciting feature directorial debut from Chris Struckman, titled Shelby Oaks. With humble beginnings on Kickstarter, this film quickly rose to the top. Originally posted on March 1st, 2022 with a goal of $250,000, donors blew that out of the water, reaching a total of $1,390,845 with 14,720 backers by just March 25th, making it the #1 most funded project in horror movies on Kickstarter. The story follows Mia, a woman who is trying to investigate the disappearance of her sister, a paranormal investigator who goes missing along with the rest of her group called the Paranormal Paranoids. But as Mia's search continues, she uncovers more twisted and dark evidence related to her sister's disappearance, ultimately leading her to suspect that their imaginary demon from their childhood may have been real all this time. Starring Camille Sullivan as Mia, this horror film combines feature shots as well as elements of found footage and is sure to have us all shaking in our boots soon. Coming in at number 3 is the creepy robot doll thriller we've all been waiting for, Megan. Set to release January 13th, I cannot tell you how excited I am for this. It follows the story of an 8-year-old Katie who, after the tragic death of her parents, is sent to live with her aunt Gemma. However, Gemma soon feels overwhelmed by the custody of her niece on top of her robotics career, and so in an effort to help Katie feel less lonely, she decides to gift her her latest creation, an AI friend named Megan, an acronym for Model 3 Generative Android. Gemma tells the robot it is her mission to protect Katie from physical or emotional harm at all costs, and I mean really, what could go wrong with that? The trailer nearly broke the internet within 1 hour of its release, with some calling her a quote yassified Annabelle or a possessed American Girl doll. But one thing is for sure, people are pumped for the new generation doll thriller, starring some incredible actors like Allison Williams from Get Out as Gemma and Violet McGraw from Haunting of Hill House as Katie. I'm already hooked. The role of Megan is split into 2, with Amy Donald playing her on screen while Jenna Davis voicing the character. This sci-fi thriller dives into the compelling and all too relatable fear that our technologies just might turn against us. Coming in at number 2, The Exorcist. While it was rumored for years that this day would never come, it seems Sony has obtained the rights to the original movie source material, and with a blessing from Friedkin, the original creator, it looks like we're in store for a bone-chilling reboot. This reboot will star Ellen Burstyn reprising her role as Chris McNeil from the original series, and she is joined by Leslie Odom Jr. and Dowd. While much of the plot is under wraps, what we do know for sure is that the sequel will follow the father of a demon-possessed child who seeks out Chris for help, knowing she has dealt with similar evils before. Set to release on October 13th, 2023, the perfect release date for a horror movie. I'll be holding my breath until then. And last up in our number 1 spot, from the plot twist master M. Night Shyamalan, we have Knock at the Cabin. This psychological thriller is an adaptation of the 2018 horror novel The Cabin at the End of the World, and depicts a simple premise. While on vacation at a cabin, a girl and her parents are taken hostage by a group of 4 strangers. The strangers demand they make a choice in order to avoid and prevent an apocalypse. But as is expected with any Shyamalan movie, I am sure we are in for twist after twist. Slated to premiere February 3rd, 2023, this film has a ragtag cast that I can't wait to see together. Starring Jonathan Groff, famous Broadway actor, Dave Bautista, ex-wrestler, and Rupert Grint from Harry Potter, among other cast members. I'm so interested to see how all their characters come together. Well, mark your calendars, horror fans, because if I can tell anything from the trailer, this movie is gonna be unhinged, and I'll be in the front row watching it all unravel the second it comes out.
Number 10. Get Out. Did you know that right from the beginning of the movie, director Jordan Peele gave us a huge hint about the sinister events that were going to take place? The message was just hidden in another language. A Swahili song called Sikaliza, sorry if my pronunciation was off, is played throughout the film, including during its opening. And while it sounds beautiful, the lyrics are actually very foreboding. Translated, this is what the song means. Brother, listen to the ancestors, run. You need to run far, listen to the truth, run to save yourself. A pretty clear warning from the director and the score. The song plays again during the party scene and again when Chris looks at the deer head on the wall, implying that he needs to run or he would be their next trophy. Before we move on to our next entry, give those like and subscribe buttons some love if you're enjoying the video so far. Number 9. Bride of Chucky. In the, some would say, disappointing 1998 movie, there are several references to some classic horror movies, all of which you'd be better off watching than this one. In the evidence locker where Tiffany goes to get Chucky's remains, you can see relics from some of the best horror villains ever. Jason Voorhees' hockey mask, Michael Myers' mask, Leatherface's chainsaw, and Freddy Krueger's bladed glove. Does that mean that all of these movies take place in the same universe? There are plenty of small nods in each of their series to each other, so this is either a love letter to classic horror or an attempt to create a joint universe. Number 8. Scream, 1996. The original Scream changed the game when it came to horror flicks, mixing in a fantastically played out mystery with meta commentary on horror movie tropes puts it at the top of many people's greatest of all time lists, and this clever little Easter egg fits right into those themes. In one scene, Randy Meeks, no relation to myself, who is played by Jamie Kennedy, is sitting on the couch and watching the original Halloween movie. On screen, Jamie Lee Curtis is trying to outrun Michael Myers, and Randy keeps yelling at the screen, "Jamie, look behind you!" But right behind him, Ghostface appears brandishing the signature blade. So, Jamie Kennedy is not only yelling at the movie, but giving a meta warning to himself. Number 7. Saw. The Saw franchise is one of my guilty pleasures. They get more and more ridiculous as the series progresses, but the first installment is a near masterpiece in my opinion, with phenomenal twists and simple, though sometimes silly, execution. Famed horror director and writer James Wan loves an Easter egg and seemingly can't resist hiding things in plain view. Early on in the movie, we see Dr. Gordon speaking with students about one of his cancer patients, which Zepp informs us is named John Kramer, who is later revealed to be Jigsaw himself. If you look close enough during this scene, you can see that the director left a clue to Kramer's evil alter ego. In front of him, on the table, is a notebook on which he has drawn what seems to be an initial blueprint for the reverse bear trap, one of the most iconic of Jigsaw's traps. Really dangling the lead in front of us on that one. I've watched these movies countless times and only recently caught this one. Number 6. Insidious. Also directed by James Wan, Insidious has many Easter eggs that will leave you pausing and rewinding. Chief among them them is an early appearance of the ghost boy. When we are following the mother around the house as she does chores, she has a run-in with a terrifying ghost that runs and dances through the house, scaring her half to death. But just before she sees the boy, the audience gets a quick sneak peek. In the laundry room, you can just barely make him out standing under the coat rack before the camera pans away, and he appears again seconds later in a totally different spot. There's another hidden message here left by the director hinting back to Saw, as America's sweetheart Patrick Wilson's character sits in his classroom. On the blackboard behind him is a detention list where the director's name is written with double detention. What did you do, James? And right under that is a crude drawing of Billy the Puppet, Jigsaw's tricycle driving mascot. Number 5, The Conjuring 2. Another movie starring America's sweetheart Patrick Wilson. Don't question it, it's just a fact. But this time he is playing an investigator, Ed Warren, and not the one being possessed. The main villain of the movie is a ghostly demon taking the form of a nun named Vecna, and while the name is revealed later in the movie, it is also hidden multiple times early on. It can be seen being spelled out on the kitchen windowsill, on a bracelet being made, and on the bookshelf of Lorraine Warren, truly showing how much Vecna has infested their world. Also, guess who directed this one? You guessed it, James Wan. Man, keep an eye on this kid, he just might have a career ahead of him. Number 4, Hereditary. Newfound horror genius Ari Aster's first feature film portrays a harrowing tale of cults, obsession, and the passing down of generational trauma, filled to the brim with terrifying imagery and clues as to the character's inevitable demise. This is easily one of the most frightening movies I have seen in years, and not for the jump scares, but because it earns every second of your terror with a slow build that explodes in the last 20 minutes. Throughout the movie, the symbol of the cult of Payman is hidden everywhere. Necklaces carved into poles, painted in blood on walls, but the cult's followers are just as ever present and well hidden. Near the beginning of the film, Peter is smoking out the window and there is a puff of smoke when he breathes out into the night air. But if you look closely, you can see an icy breath close to the camera, just before Peter breathes out, as though someone is watching him, just out of frame. The cultists appear many times throughout the movie, usually nude. Weirdos. They're hidden behind a pillar in the attic, and in a blink and you'll miss it moment surrounding the entire house when there's a smash cut from day to night. Really creepy knowing that they're watching the horrifying events unfold from the shadows all the time. Number 3, The Thing, Foreshadowing. The Thing is actually going to take up our number 3 and number 2 spots today, and as a true masterpiece of horror, rightly so. The first hidden message in this fantastic film comes in the very first scene, when the Norwegian helicopter pilot is chasing after a dog, shooting wildly and yelling at the research team, but as none of them speak his language, he's mistaken as having gone mad, and after missing the dog with a shot from his rifle, the team shoots the pilot and the movie starts with a bang. What they didn't know, and what the director didn't want you to know, without doing some work anyway, is that the pilot was actually giving a warning to the science team. When translated, this is what the pilot yells just before he's killed. "Get the hell out of there, that is not a dog, it's some sort of thing, it's imitating a dog, it isn't real, get away you idiots." If only one of them could speak Norwegian, the terrors that ensued could have been avoided, but then we wouldn't have gotten to see all those amazing special effects. Number 2, who is the Thing? The end of the movie is purposely left ambiguous, with Charles and McReady waiting to freeze to death and, quote, see what happens. We are led to believe that one of them is the terrifying, shape-shifting thing, and it's not easy to tell who, but director John Carpenter left us some small clues to solve the mystery for ourselves. Some fans believe that Mac filled the scotch bottle that he hands Childs with gasoline earlier in the movie, and when he takes a sip, Mac's knowing smile proves that he's caught the thing red-handed, as a human would recoil at the taste, but Childs drinks it without hesitation. Another examination of the scene shows that you can clearly see McReady's breath when they are speaking out in the cold, but not Childs, further proving who is still human. The cinematographer Dean Cundey also said that he used eye light to show who was human and who was not, but others still believe that neither of them have been infected, and that the ending shows the paranoia and obsession dooming the human race as the monster lies in wait for its next victims. And finally, our number 1 spot goes to Ari Aster's Midsummer. This beautifully haunting film sees a young woman who is held back by the traumatic deaths of her family, traveling to Sweden with a friend to participate in a once-in-a-century festival in their village. Things go absolutely off the rails from there, and I don't have time to explain everything, but I don't have to, because the director left the entire movie's plot in plain view from the very beginning. The movie opens with a tapestry, which appears to show the passing of the seasons. But if you look closely, after a rewatch, you can see many of the movie's events played out right there. From the loss of Danny's family to people leaping to their own deaths, it seems that it was all predestined. There are other murals in the bunkhouse which show some more specific images, like the mating ritual and the burning bear, showing how absolutely nothing has been in the main character's control the whole movie. Heck, there's even a painting in Danny and Christian's apartment of a girl in a flower crown kissing a bear, their final fates in the film. There is so much more hidden imagery in this movie that relates to past trauma, irrational fears, and predestination that it deserves multiple rewatches. In fact, I think I'm gonna go home and watch it tonight just to see what else I missed.